She also visited Israel shortly after the October 7 attacks and is now advocating for Holocaust education in Muslim communities. And Roz Rothstein, who's the co-founder and CEO of Stand With Us, educating people of all ages and faiths and fighting the newest forms of anti-Semitism. Forward magazine has twice named Roz one of the 50 most influential Jews in America, and in 2011 and again in 2016, the Jerusalem Post named her as one of the 50 most influential Jews in the world.
And the one and only Heidi, who has spent so much of her life really bringing to the entertainment industry true stories about women at risk, those voices that otherwise would never be heard. I'm so proud of you, Heidi. Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't do it. You know, one of the things that are so important about this evening is for all of us, to think about one moment that everyone knows about. It's the moment when a baby is born. It's that moment of creation. And we all gasp at that moment. And we look at that baby. We wait for your baby's eyes to open. Because in those eyes is the hope of the world. There's nothing sadder than when you see in those eyes fear. When you see in those eyes helplessness, hopelessness. Because that, my dear friends, is so much of what we are seeing today everywhere. The reality is that intolerance, as I said, and hate, excuse me, have been so normalized. The reality is that sex trafficking is a $300 billion business on the back of young girls from all cultures, which is unacceptable. I have seen 6-year-old girls being sold for $1 in DRC because the girl was hungry, and with that $1 she bought a cup of rice for herself and her family. What we've seen here is so much worse. The idea that you can use women as weapons of war by raping and mutilating and killing women, young girls, and killing families, nations, everything. This moment and these people being here today is a solemn moment of truth. I hope you all take it with you and spread it. Thank you. You know, my first question is to you, Ahmed. You have experienced horrific things in your life recently. Your entire family, 29 people, were killed in Gaza during the Israeli-Gaza war and with Hamas. And yet you decided to be so outspoken about the atrocities of October 7. In your own words, please tell us about your journey here.
Well, thanks again for having me, and I appreciate you recognizing earlier that it is incredibly difficult to be here, not just because of the challenges of trying to hold multiple truths and acknowledge the suffering of Israeli victims of October 7th, as I also hold space for my own family and my own people who are being killed as we speak in this horrendous war started by Hamas. I also want to be clear that I'm not here to talk politics. I do a lot of politics. You can go to my Twitter or whatever. I'm here to keep the focus on the victims of October 7th, specifically the Israeli women who were victimized and abused on October 7th. I was compelled to put myself out there after I saw what was unfolding. It was October 6th here in the United States, and I knew that Gaza, as we knew it, would cease to exist. I knew this would be a horrendous disaster of epic proportions for my folks and my family and people. I was also horrified by the dehumanization of Israeli victims on October 7th, the celebration of taking women and children as hostages and relegating that to a mere act of resistance. This idea that October 7th was entirely unavoidable and that it was only a consequence of policies that Israel committed. I maintain that it was entirely avoidable and that Hamas made choices that harmed Israelis and harmed the people of Gaza. And so the main message that I want to share and offer here, again, in the spirit of keeping the focus on Israeli victims and Israeli women who were abused and the hostages as well, is that it is entirely possible to hold multiple truths, to have a focus on empathy and shared humanity, not as a kumbaya, big picture, let's hold hands and have falafels and everything's going to be fine, but actually as a pragmatic evolution that's going to help us get past one of the most horrific episodes of the Israel and Palestine conflict. And so I can feel empathy for Israeli women, I can feel sadness and horror, I can talk to Israeli hostage families as I have, I can talk to former hostages, while I also am critical of the war and the killing of my family members, children as young as 3 and 4 months old, shredded to pieces, my aunt Zainab, my uncle Abdullah, all of my family members that I grew up with, my homes being destroyed. I don't have to exclude the suffering of Israeli victims. And it's easier said than done. It takes a daily commitment. It's hard. I'm being pulled in a bunch of different directions. People on the pro-Palestine side and people on the pro-Israel side, everybody's projecting onto me what I need to be saying, what I need to be doing. And I've decided that I'm going to speak my truth, leveraging my lived experience, my contacts and connections with the Jewish community, but also my contacts with my people and my family. And I want to just be one last thing clear. It's like I never claim to speak on behalf of the Palestinians. I speak for myself. I operate solo. I have a very unique lived experience. But I can assure you that many Palestinians, maybe who are less outspoken than myself, who are afraid, who can't deal with the threats, or who are genuinely confused and don't know how to support their people, don't know that speaking out against sexual violence and rapes doesn't mean you support the war, doesn't mean you support the bombing of children in Gaza, doesn't mean you support what's happening. So there are many people that may not think exactly what I'm thinking, but they hold different bits and pieces of my views and opinions.
You know, earlier we spoke about why is it okay that Hamas, or is it okay for a lot of the Palestinian people living in Gaza, that Hamas has been using them as human shields, using children as human shields, coming through those tunnels and sacrificing their own people. So my question to you is, what is your perspective on Hamas as leadership, as a government in Gaza? And what is the plight for the Palestinian people in view of that?
Certainly, and despite being out of Gaza for many years, like I said, my immediate and extended family were there. I tried to build an internationally run Israeli-approved airport in Gaza in 2015. I have contacts and networks there and feel that I can speak from experience and actual data. And the truth is, while Hamas does in fact have a base of support that I personally would not put beyond 30%, a large number of the people of Gaza, including those who once upon a time supported Hamas, are furious with what the group has done for almost 2 decades in terms of getting a blockade imposed upon Gaza due to their strategic choices aligning with Iran, the stealing of a lot of the Palestinian people's resources, the embedding of militant assets throughout the civilian population.